I was still in my funeral suit when my stepson slid a termination packet across the boardroom table like he was handing me a menu. 5 days after I buried Marianne. 5 days after the world had gone quiet around her absence. Evan Brooke fired me, and he didn't have the faintest idea that I owned 67% of the company. The room smelled like burnt coffee and fresh toner. That's what I remember most. Not the polished wood table. Not the oversized windows framing downtown Toledo in its gray December gloom. Not even the way the fluorescent lights hummed, buzzing just beneath perception. It was that bitter, stale coffee, reheated too many times, and the chemical tang of a copier overworked, hot from printing stacks of contracts nobody would ever read twice. Evan sat at the head of the table in Marianne's chair. Her leather chair still bore the faintest impression of her, a soft curve at the back. The gentle indent where she pressed her palms, the tiny crease in the leather where she tucked her pen behind her ear, like she might walk back in at any second. Smooth her skirt, lean on the edge of the table, and give me that look. Frank, behave yourself. But Marianne wasn't walking back in. Evan's hair was slicked back too neatly, as though he'd watched a YouTube tutorial on how to look like a CEO in 5 minutes. His navy suit hugged him awkwardly at the shoulders, silver watch catching the overhead lights. Brand new, 33 years old, already playing king. He didn't look like a man who'd lost his mother. He looked like a man who had been waiting all his life for his turn. Around the table sat people who had been with Great Lakes Industrial Supply longer than Evan had been alive. People who remembered the company when it smelled like engine oil and ambition, not corporate branding and liability clauses. Mark Dwyer, our CFO, 56, Toledo born and raised, the kind of man who kept a ledger in his head and a rosary in his glove box. Rita Sanchez from operations, 49, sharp-eyed, tough as road salt, the kind of woman who could smell a bad deal through a closed door and a thick mahogany wall. Dennis Harland, board chair, 61, handshake guy, old Rotary Club type, always smelling faintly of wintergreen mints and aftershave. They all wore that same tight expression you see at funerals when people don't know what to say, sympathy mixed with fear, because nobody expected this meeting to be about firing me. Evan cleared his throat. The sound bounced off the walls. Even the HVAC seemed to hush, like the building itself was holding its breath. First, he said, clicking a remote with the practiced poise of someone giving a TED Talk, I want to thank everyone for being here. I know it's been a difficult week. His voice was too calm, too measured, like a narrator in a corporate video, a voice meant to convince, to distract, to neutralize. I sat with my hands folded, sleeves pulled over my wrists. My tie was too tight. Marianne had picked it out years ago at a little men's shop near Franklin Park Mall. She said it made my eyes look warmer. That morning, I tied it out of muscle memory and grief. Not for board meetings. I was thinking about the cold of her forehead the last time I kissed her, not the glare of fluorescent lights. Evan continued, as you know, the board has asked me to step in as interim CEO. Mark shifted in his seat. Dennis nodded stiffly. The wind outside rattled the window seams. Lake Erie wind doesn't care about funerals or corporate titles, it just cuts straight to your bones. Evan's eyes flicked up to me, sharp, unreadable. Frank, he said, like I was a stranger at a seminar, I'm going to keep this simple. A man who promises simplicity usually has cruelty in mind. He slid the packet across the table toward me, thick, crisp, freshly stapled. The first page gleamed with our company logo at the top, glossy, professional. Below it, separation agreement. Mark inhaled sharply. Rita's jaw tightened. Dennis blinked rapidly, as if trying to wake up from a bad dream. I didn't move. I stared at it like a serpent coiled on the table. Effective immediately, Evan said. We're terminating your employment with Great Lakes Industrial Supply. The words thudded against my chest like a box dropped on concrete. Not loud, not dramatic, just unyielding. You're firing me? I said, my voice steady despite the frost inside me. Yes, he replied, calm. We're moving in a new direction. A new direction? I repeated, tasting the corporate fog, empty, hollow. Evan folded his hands neatly in front of him. Frank, you've been here a long time. You've done what you can, but the company needs modern leadership. Mark flushed red. Evan, Evan raised a hand without even looking. Mark, please let me finish. Dennis cleared his throat. Evan, this seems sudden. Sudden? Evan said, smiling thinly. Dennis, my mother passed away. That's sudden. And there it was, the first time he mentioned her, not Marianne. Not mom, but leverage. He looked at me again. Frank, I'm sure this is emotional for you, but we have to consider optics. Optics, I repeated. Yes, Evan said, leaning back in Marianne's chair like it belonged to him. Investors, partners, people who expect stability, and frankly, keeping the grieving husband in a high-level role creates uncertainty. Grief turned sharp in my chest. Not yet anger, not yet revenge, just that jagged ache of being erased while still alive. Rita's voice cut softly through the room. Frank isn't uncertainty. He's the reason half our suppliers still answer the phone. Evan's polite smile never faltered. Loyalty isn't a strategy. I slid the packet closer. Fresh ink, crisp paper. This isn't personal, Evan said. I exhaled. Slow and steady. My wife dies on Thursday. I bury her on Saturday. You fire me on Tuesday. And you want me to believe it's not personal? His eyes flickered. Just a fraction. My mother built this company, he said. She'd want what's best for it. She'd want what's best for her people, I replied. Evan shrugged. People adjust. Dennis leaned forward. Evan, Frank is. I'm CEO. Evan snapped. The board approved it. Silence. I opened the packet. Severance, benefits, non-disparagement clauses, cold, antiseptic, written by someone who had never lost a spouse, who had never walked through the hollow of grief. Then I saw it. Page 6, buried under acknowledgments, like a secret in a poorly filed drawer, a clause stating I held no voting interest in Great Lakes Industrial Supply. Sloppy, wrong, dangerous. I didn't react. Evan tapped his pen. If you sign today, this stays clean. And if I don't? I asked. Calm. His smile sharpened. We make it unpleasant. Rita's eyes flashed. Are you threatening him? I'm explaining options, he said smoothly. I stared at the page. Quiet men finish things, Marianne used to say. I picked up the pen. Mark's eyes widened. Frank. I raised a hand. It's okay. I signed, initialed. Paused just long enough at the voting clause for Evan to notice, then initialed that too. Because it meant nothing, and because believing it would make him careless. I slid the packet back. Security will escort you out, Evan said. I stood, knees aching, grief heavy, but steady. I looked at the room. The people who had built this company, who had walked with us for decades, still sat there. I nodded. Take care of each other. Evan snorted. 2 guards walked me to the elevator. Doors closed. I caught my reflection in the metal panel. Black suit, hollow eyes, crooked tie, widower, fired, invisible. Outside, Toledo's December wind slapped me awake. I scraped frost from my truck with bare hands and drove home. And that's when it hit me. Evan hadn't just fired me. He tried to erase me. At home, the house smelled like lavender and casserole. I hung my coat and felt something in my pocket. A brass paperclip, Marianne's. Wrapped around a folded yellow note. Blue folder, top drawer. If he ever tries it. That was the moment grief became something else. Something patient, something quiet, something deadly if provoked. The kind of anger that waits. The truck heater worked overtime as I crossed the Maumee River. Gray water sluggish beneath the bridge, reflecting the low winter sun like molten steel. Toledo looked the same as it always did, brick buildings, tired storefronts, people bundled in heavy coats, scarves pulled tight, moving with the sort of quiet resilience that comes from knowing life rarely gives second chances. I drove slower than usual, letting the city pass by in a blur of frost-coated windshields and amber streetlights. I pulled into the lot of Rosie's Diner, a low, squat building with fogged-up windows and a hand-painted sign that probably hadn't changed since Reagan was president. The smell hit me the moment I opened the door. Bacon grease, burnt toast, coffee that had been sitting too long on a burner, and the faint tang of linoleum polish. Familiar, safe, and angry on my behalf. Rosie waved me over before I even made it to the counter. No questions. No words. Just a gesture that carried decades of understanding. Black coffee, I said. She set the mug down hard, as though she were scolding Evan through me. Yeah, she muttered. That boy's got no soul. I didn't argue. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the mug. Heat seeped into my fingers and the hollow ache in my chest. A couple of booths down, two men from the plant were talking quietly. I caught my name. Then Evans. One of them shook his head, muttering words I didn't hear but understood all the same. Marianne wouldn't have stood for that, the other said. I stared into the black coffee, swirling reflections of the ceiling lights. No, I whispered. She wouldn't. My phone buzzed. A text from Rita. He's talking layoffs, big ones. Monday. My stomach dropped. I typed back slowly. Don't say anything yet. I'm on it. I didn't yet know what on it meant. All I knew was that I couldn't walk away, not now. Not with Marianne's words echoing in my mind. If Evan ever tries to erase you, don't let him erase our people. After the diner, I drove past the plant. Shift change. Siren wailing low and long. Men and women poured out. Collars turned up. Lunch pails swinging. I recognized faces I'd known for decades. People who had stayed when the company was lean because they trusted us. Because they trusted her. I parked across the street and watched until the lot emptied. My hands shook, not from cold, but from the pressure building in my chest. The weight of knowing how quickly Evan could dismantle all of this if left unchecked. By mid-afternoon, I found myself at the cemetery. The ground was frozen, the grass brittle and gray. Marianne's headstone was still new, the dirt around it darker than the surrounding plots. I knelt, knees protesting, and set the brass paperclip at the base, almost ceremoniously. I didn't ask for this, I said aloud. My voice sounded strange, thin and raw in the open air. I just wanted to finish what we started. The wind picked up, sharp and cutting, rifling the edges of my coat. I thought about the night Marianne had looked at me across our kitchen table, eyes sharp under the warm glow of the pendant light, and said, if Evan ever tries to erase you, don't let him erase our people. I stayed longer than I meant to, the sky fading into the pale gray of approaching evening, until my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, voice tired. Frank Dalton, said a familiar chuckle. Still answering your own phone? Good sign. Harold, I said, relief and caution mixed in the syllables. Free this afternoon? For you, always, I replied. Good, he said, I don't like offices. Meet me at Elle's barbershop on Losky. And Frank, bring the blue folder. I hung up and stared at Marianne's name etched in stone. The grief was still there, heavy, raw, but underneath, something else had begun to take shape. Resolve, focus. Monday was coming, and for the first time since the funeral, I wasn't afraid of it. Lou's barbershop hadn't changed since the first Bush was president. Same red and white pole outside, cracked vinyl chairs along the wall, corkboard cluttered with flyers for fish fries, gun raffles, and a faded notice for a VFW pancake breakfast from 3 months ago. I pushed the door open. A bell jingled. The smell of talc, aftershave, and a faint hint of burned hair filled the air. Men talked quietly about the things that mattered, loudly about the things that didn't. Harold Clenny sat in the last chair, halfway through a haircut, draped in a striped cape like a man who had made peace with life's complications, 72 years old. Thick white eyebrows, wire-rim glasses perched low on his nose. He held a folded copy of The Blade, reading it like it was still 1989. He looked up in the mirror and smiled. Frank Dalton, he said, you look like hell. I feel worse, I said. Harold nodded knowingly. Checks out, he said. The barber, a thin man named Lou, gave a polite nod but no questions. That was the rule. I sat in an empty chair, the blue folder heavy in my coat pocket. Harold waited until Lou stepped away, then leaned closer. You still driving that Ford? Yeah, I said, a weak laugh escaping. Means I haven't lost my mind. Harold snorted. Evan fired you. I know, I said flatly. Toledo's small. Stupid doesn't stay secret long, Harold said. He finished his haircut, paid Lou, and then motioned toward the back room. Let's talk where the Clippers can't hear us. The back room was cramped. With a metal table, 2 folding chairs, and a coffee pot older than both of us. I pulled the blue folder from my pocket and set it on the table. Harold didn't open it immediately. He just studied me, eyes sharp behind glasses. "You sure you want to open this door?" he asked. "I think my wife opened it 7 years ago," I said. "I'm just walking through." Harold nodded and lifted the folder. Page by page, he read. Checked notarized stamps. Verified dates. His face betrayed nothing, but I could feel the mental gears turning. Finally, he leaned back, exhaled slowly. "Well," he said, "I'll be damned." "That good or bad?" I asked. "Airtight," he said. "Voting trust. Share transfer properly filed. 67%. Clean as a church ledger." I felt a fraction of the weight lift. Harold's lips twitched. "No, that's the best part. Evan's running around thinking he inherited a throne. What he actually has is a folding chair with one leg missing." I almost smiled. Almost. He raised a finger. "Only works if you don't get impatient." "He's talking layoffs," I said. 50 names. Longtime folks. Harold said. "He's courting private equity, 2 groups. 1 Chicago, 1 out east. They smell blood." "What kind of blood?" I asked. "Benefits. Supplier contracts. Pensions, everything Marianne protected." My hands curled into fists. "He's already started filing paperwork," Harold said. "Governance changes, non-voting share issuance, legal gray areas that scare banks and confuse boards." "So I stop him," I said. "Not yet," Harold warned. I stared at him. "You go too soon," he said. "Evan notices. Emergency meetings, mental fitness nonsense. He paints you as the grieving widower who's lost perspective." I hated how right he sounded. "So what do I do?" "You let him talk. Pitch. Show everyone who he really is." I exhaled slowly, tension coiling in my chest. "And then?" "You remind everyone who actually owns the house," Harold said quietly, voice firm. I drove home with the folder beside me like a silent passenger. The sky darkened, streetlights flickering on. I reheated leftover casserole, barely tasting it. Hands still shook. I hated that. I hated feeling old, fragile. A text from Mark. "Frank, whatever you're planning, be careful. He's moving fast." I stared at the screen. Typed back. "I know. Tell Rita to keep everyone steady. No panic." I went to Marianne's desk, sat in her chair, pen behind my ear, eyes sharp in memory. "Quiet men finish things." I whispered it aloud. Monday was 3 days away. Evan had no idea the depth of the hole he'd dug. And I intended to make sure he learned it.